Alright, let's go. Video 2 today. We are going to talk about tree stuff. Tree work, tree products, ropes, harness slash saddles. Coming into the modern age with this Buckingham Throttle, carabiners, all of this good stuff we are going to speak on. And I'm also going to get some video out at the tree that I'm going to start working on today. I'm going to start taking that one down. It's a leaner, going towards the house. And so I got to get it down. I've been watching it for a few years. And it's just getting progressively larger. It's a big maple. Getting progressively larger, and it's leaning towards the house. And although it has shown no signs of doing anything that I wouldn't want to happen. But every storm makes me nervous. You know what I mean? So I hate to do it, but I'm going to take it down. It's a nice, healthy tree, and I do not like to remove healthy trees. When I was, young and whatnot, I had a tree business for a few years. Like I said in the last video, I've had several different careers because I get bored easy. I want to learn something else, and I move on to something else. Things I'm interested in, I get very good at them and whatnot. And I like doing a lot of different stuff. Never did get into coffee roasting though. It seems a little bit too nerdy, I guess. I don't know, I did electronics and that's kind of nerdy, right? So, doesn't really matter. But, talking about this climbing stuff, I talked about my lifespan being many decades now. And it's like I feel like I've lived so long. When is it gonna end? It's just like so long. It seems like decade after decade goes by, and I talked to my one brother who's passed away since I talked to him about it, and he says the best years I had were in my 50s and 60s. And I said, "Oh, really?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, because my kids were all grown and I could enjoy doing things with them and not have to babysit them. They were all men, and now those same kids who are my nephews, they're, upper 40s right now. My nephews. Yeah. Funny how that happens. I got nieces and nephews that are middle aged. Anyway, let's get back to this tree stuff. So I started out in the 70s working for my dad from the very bottom. I talked about this before. I wanted to be a man. Seemed like tree stuff was, Paul Bunyan, and Babe the Big Blue Ox, blah, blah, blah. I read that story when I was young, and seemed like and mountain men type stuff, and that, you seemed like, you wanted to, like, be a man. In order to be a man, you had to do something manly, and tree work seemed to be manly. Logging and arborist stuff and all that seemed pretty manly to me as a kid. Anyway, so I wanted to earn my right to be a man, and I finally badgered my dad long enough. He took me to the job site and got me started. Anyway, I went off through that before, so we'll continue on with this tree stuff. So I got this new device in. I decided to come into the 21st century. I think this is the 21st century. This is a Buckingham Throttle. Okay, it's the Buckingham Throttle, and it is a device. It is a life sustaining device that attaches to your rope. Okay, and you can use it in a couple of different configurations. All right, and I was initially from the 70s up until recently. I was on Blake's hitch, using the split tail. I started out with just Blake's hitch, which uses the end of the climbing line. You know, and you can go look that up, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But this Buckingham Throttle, now there's a number of these types of devices on the market now. You know, people have gotten quite inventive in using their brains to come up with cool stuff. You know, now this right here is an ascender. This is a CMI Ultra Ascender, and I've had this for a lot of years. But this was just for, you know, ascending ropes. And it's got little bitty teeth in there, which, you know, what I liked about the Ultra Ascenders was the teeth won't damage the rope, because they're rounded. The nubs are rounded on the teeth. So the teeth are rounded on the very point. They're not pointy to where they'll rip your rope up. But those CMI Ultra Ascenders, I highly recommend those if you need this type of an ascender. Nowadays they have what they call ankle ascender and knee ascenders, where you do rope walking. Okay, you just up, 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 right? And you ascend the rope like that. They do that with most of the time you see people doing this, what they call SRT, single rope technique. Now I learned what's called DDRT, which is called doubled rope technique. Okay, and that doesn't mean that you have double the strength because you have two ropes, because there's a single point where it bends through a ring and ring, or it goes through a cambium saver. Okay, it's all one rope, so it's still one strength, but you have a mechanical advantage with DDRT. Now they're calling it MRS, which is, I understand that sounds supposed to be moving rope system. MRS, moving rope system. So you got single rope system, and then they have MRS, moving rope system. They also called it DRT, double rope technique. See, this is the thing. Why can't we just stick with convention? You know, DDRT, doubled rope, right? Doubled rope technique, DDRT. That's the original. Okay, DDRT is the original. SRT came out later. We can go into, you know, things about that, but these videos are long enough already, and I'm already 10 minutes in to this video. So I went ahead and I printed this off from Buckingham's website. Okay, and this talks about recommended climbing lines for optimal performance. Now it says that this device is good for 11 to 13 millimeter ropes, but I think that they're being very generous, because I have several ropes here and I haven't got on a rope yet in the tree with it, so just let you know. But one thing that I will note is that most of these recommended ropes, most of them, are in that 11 millimeter sweet spot, right? so the thinner ropes. I have a 12.7 millimeter Samson tree rope here, and I absolutely think that this is a bad idea to use that rope in this device. It's a Vortex Hot, 12.7 millimeter Samson Vortex Hot, and I do not think that it will be a good idea to use it in this device because it's too thick. Now, I'm gonna go. I've got several ring-in rings, and I got 3 in my bag over there. I got 3 ring-in rings, and I'm gonna put those in the tree, and I'm gonna put different ropes on them, and I'm gonna try each rope, you know, and fiddle around with the device, you know. But you know, I learned tree arborist tree like climbing a long time ago, and then during my younger years I learned how to climb from the French. I had French instructors. I learned how to do rock climbing and ice climbing and that sort of stuff. You know, I did some mountaineering, okay, but during that time period, I got very familiar with climbing ropes when it's dealing with, you know, the rock and ice and mountaineering, okay. So I have a rope here from that era that I got from France, and it's a mammut rope. Actually, I've got it right here. This is it right here. During those days, this was one of the top ropes that you could own, and I figure, you know, it's a lifeline. Buy the best. You know, back in the day, Mammoth and Edelweiss and Beal and there were a few really good ropes back in those days. This is a Blake's hitch here. Okay, so this is set up. This is set up as a positioning rope, right? We'll go into that later. But I put the throttle on this 11 millimeter Mammut rope. This rope is very old. It's several decades old, but I still use it. I don't use it as a lifeline. I use it as a work line, a positioning line. All right. Now, this was a what they called a super dry, so it was treated, you know, to repel water, interior and exterior. But when it goes in the device, it fits really nicely and it clamps really nicely. So this device here, I went ahead and I put a piece of cordage on here in case I do a chest harness. I clip it into the chest for testing purposes or whatever. Get quiet. Anyway, this is the throttle, right? And this is a really, really well made and well thought out device. But when I put this rope, I'm just going to pull out a bit of rope here. But when I put this rope in this device, it really works nicely. I'm not used to this device yet here. Hold on just a second. There we go. You gotta push this in and then this separates. And then this part here you gotta pull to one side and then turn and then this opens. So what happens here is you got these These right here pinch the rope gently. Okay, so these are what actually provides your friction, these cams. And then there's a bollard down here that the rope moves around. And you can move this bollard from what they call MRS over here. So if you want it in MRS mode, or you could push it and then over, and then it's in SRS mode. SRS mode just provides more friction. That's why I think it's kind of not wise to call it SRS mode and MRS mode, because I think that you should move this according to how much friction that you need on the rope. That's how I think it should be. The thought process should be. That's just my opinion. Now I've got this in MRS mode now, and it was in SRS mode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop this video because the little timer went off, and we'll come back in video 3 and we'll talk about this more in another video, and then I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. I need to go outside and think about what I'm going to do with this tree. I may not start working on that tree today. I may start on it on Monday. I just got to look at the weather. We'll see you in another one.